So you covered a lot of things this morning. Different perspective this afternoon, let me just say that. But I'm going to share with you some things. As you can imagine, I enjoy teaching, enjoy consulting. I've been a practitioner in development, and then the last 18 years consulting. The master's I have is a master's in philanthropy and development. The reason I tell you that is because I just finished my doctorate of ministry in leadership in the emerging culture under Leonard Sweet. My dissertation was focused on stewardship, where I created a Master of Arts in stewardship and development for an evangelical seminary, of which no one has accepted. So my advisor said, it's up to you to write it. It's up to God to get it into the seminary before Jesus comes back. So that's, if you know seminaries, they don't change too readily. So, but anyway, that's some of the things I'm going to share with you. The first thing I want to do, the first session, is go through some of the things, and feel free to ask questions throughout. If I'm watching the time and have to move along, I'll just move that along. But otherwise, speaking on the book Ministry of Development that I know you've covered, I know you've had a number of things, but I'll just give you some of my perspective and maybe ask you some questions on some things. All right, development as ministry. Ministering to partners, seeing them as partners. What does it mean to you when I say the phrase ministering to? When I wrote this, if you remember reading the first chapter, is development part of God's plan? Or is it just another way slick marketing types have manipulated Scripture to make everyone feel good about taking something from someone? What is God's view of this? How does Scripture back this up? So I'm not going to review all that because I know you've covered it. But I want to hear from you now. When you are saying, rather than, I'll just tell you, I don't use the term fundraising. Fundraising to me is a part of a relationship. When you have a relationship, and as you may recall, and hopefully have committed to memory, my definition of development is creating opportunities to connect God's people to God's work. And I'll explain more of that as we get into even some more versions of that. But it is our job to help God's people invest in, be connected to, find fulfillment in God's work. Okay? So what I talk about in the book, the ministry of development. What does it mean to you to minister to one of your partners? Walk alongside them. Well, sharing life with them, walk alongside them, be a part of what they're going through. Good. What else? And I'll repeat those so we don't have to try and get the mic around. Just so I can be right back.
I think one of the main purposes with the role that God's called us to in fund development and support raising is to really be able to cast vision and help the vision of our supporters grow so that they really begin to care more and more about the world, more and more about the Great Commission. So I think that's part of our calling, is to minister through capturing vision and developing vision in our donors.
Capturing vision, developing vision, and I hear in there even challenging them in their vision, okay, of the ministry. Okay, and over here was one.
To hitchhike off of that, and to, at that time, look for those deliberate opportunities to minister back.
Looking for deliberate opportunities to minister back to them. I want to just give you an example. I worked as a director of development at the Union Gospel Mission in Seattle. And probably anywhere from 40 to 50% of my clients for the last 18 years have been rescue missions or related to addiction recovery programs, women and family shelters. And I remember going to a corporate executive's office with a proposal to do my job. And as we got acquainted, he said, "My wife and I haven't seen our son for 5 years. We're pretty sure 3 years ago he was in your shelter." And with that, the proposal just goes back in the briefcase, and you're there to minister. How many times have you had someone say to you, "I'm not in a church right now, so I'm giving you my tithe or my giving"? How many of you have had, "I'm angry with what the church is doing," or "I'm angry with what my elders doing, so I'm giving to you"? Right? Now, what do? Great, more for us. No. Do we accept the gift? I would say yes, only as an opportunity to minister to them and say, "You're hurting right now, how can I help you?" "Oh, you're new in town, can I introduce you to some pastors?" "Oh, is there something I can help you with?" Right? So we see in the ministry of development, one of the interesting things what I believe is the why we do this is more important than the what and the how. I'm a rubber meets the road kind of guy from the Midwest originally, and I think, you need to have the what and the how. And I'm going to show you measurements and how to be accountable. But I think the why differentiates us in Christian development from secular fundraising. Now, I have my CFRE, Certified Fundraising Executive. I believe in certification. I believe in the profession as a noble profession. But the more I study it, the more I hear secular fundraising, I still believe there is a higher calling. Because we will be held accountable someday, not for the funds we raise, I think, but how we help stewards achieve their goals. And I'm going to share with you how I think that is different now than the previous generations. All right? All right. One of so what is the purpose of a minister of development? What do you think if you see yourself, well, let me back up a second. How many times do we hear that the real ministry is this, and then there's development, right? Where the necessary evil, we get added on after they've planned real ministry. Okay, hopefully that day is behind us, but I've seen it time and time again. All right, and so as we look at this, say, what is the purpose of the minister of development? Maybe I've said it, but can anyone put that in what you view your purpose as a minister of development? What your purpose is? There's one, and then there's one. Yes, you.
Just viewing each individual as God views them, as Christ made them to be, and helping them on the journey to being rich towards God.
Great. Viewing them as God views them and helping them on their journey to be rich towards God. Good, because I'm going to use a lot of those words later. Nice setup. All right, and you?
So do we get a tip if we say the same words you're going to say? Or?
Yeah, checks in the mail.
Development.
yeah, development tip, yeah.
I think what we do as part of the Great Commission, I think we're supposed to make disciples, and I think part of that is helping someone come along in their relationship with Christ in the financial realm. But there's also other realms, like when you put the proposal back in your bag, that's discipleship in a completely different realm.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of contexts in which ministers of development help people develop.
Well said, and I'm going to not try and repeat all that, well said, but I think in my study, my first half of my dissertation was what's going on in the church, in parachurch and stewardship. And one of the things I think is the travesty is that we've told all our pastors to separate money from spiritual things. When Jesus spoke more on money than heaven or hell combined, we say, why? Because he needed the funds? I don't think so. Everything about money is spiritual. How we give it, how we earn it, how we loan it, how we save it. It's all from within us, and Satan knows this. I think, number one, 80% of divorce has an issue of finances in it. Satan's happy about that. Number two, you look back at this fall of 2008 and then into 2009. Was Satan happy that the United States suddenly became a third world nation and we had no money and we're suddenly a terrible economy and people were encouraged to hoard and hoard and hoard? Very happy. But what did the New Testament church, what were we called to do? Those that had were to give more, not pull back, but to give more for those that came. Yes, people were unemployed, but the 90% that still had their jobs were suddenly being told, you better pull back, you better hoard. But we see some research that I'll share with you where churches that went back to teaching stewardship and other ministries that had strong stewardship teaching and positioning, their giving met or exceeded their goals. A study by Christian Leadership Association said 60% of the organizations polled met or exceeded their 2008 goals. We don't have all the 2009 stuff in yet. All right. I just want to state one more thing. The goal of every steward, the word steward ties right into, I'm not sure if it's your mission statement or what, of Campus Crusade. Someone was asking me, my pastor was teaching about it. I said, when you think about the definition of steward and all the parables Jesus used, what did he talk about? A relationship with the owner. There is no reason to be a good steward if you don't care about your relationship with the owner. The parable of the talents, 10, 5, and 1, all the other examples. So at the heart of evangelism, the other thing you said was discipleship. We're seeing more and more that stewardship and discipleship go hand in hand because it's how we live our lives. And we'll get into that. All right, so the very first thing is, do we have a relationship with the owner? Right there, you become ministers of development because you have an opportunity. I find working with rescue missions, we had people who gave because the Bible said to give to the poor, the widow, the orphan, and in every city, total humanists. I could care less about your Jesus stuff, but you help people, right? What an opportunity we had to minister to them. And I'm going to share with you some of the ideas we used that you use as well. All right. What I put in here, and you don't have the slide. Do you all have the the notes and the slides? No slides. Oh, okay. So I just put a couple extra slides in here. This is my definition of stewardship, that it is living a lifestyle based upon an understanding of God's provision. It all comes from Him. But as a result of living this lifestyle, looking through a stewardship filter, we will be transformed by living a lifestyle of generosity and giving a portion of everything back to Him and His work through a direct relationship. Again, if we don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, why should we be a good steward? So it's basically, I'm going to share with you today that I first started working on development, and then my church asked me to teach on stewardship, so I kind of backed up and realized, stewardship comes before development. And so then as I started working on that, this is, I believe, along with separating money from spiritual things, the other mistake I believe the church in Western culture has done is we have a history now that the word stewardship implies fundraising for the local church budget. That is the number one, what I think people view. It's a fundraising strategy. It's for the local church budget. And I'm going to show you some research for that. Then, again, in the book, the Ministry of Development, creating opportunities. We know that with this narcissistic next generation, we have builders, boomers, busters, and then Barna's called them mosaics, 11 to 22. And as one person said when I mentioned that, said, what's Moses got to do with it? No, not that Moses, a mosaic, all different bits and pieces. So I called them bridgers. Someone got it, thank you. Someone after lunch got the joke, thank you. But it's builders, boomers, busters, and bridgers, just to keep the going. But as we look at this next generation from builders and boomers, and we're very concerned about the next generation of nonprofit leaders. We're concerned with church leaders. We're concerned with volunteers. We're concerned with stewardship. But one of the key things that, as I began to work in this years ago, was ownership. I told you that I was raised Catholic, and this is a Catholic university that had this program, the St. Mary's Master of Arts in Philanthropy and Development. I was in the second cohort, and they're in their 20th year now. And what's interesting is it was the first book published, and my advisor, who started the program, really neat guy, consultant, challenged me to say, how can you give something away if you don't own it? So I went back to my evangelical Bible teaching pastor that I was under, the two advisors here, and I posed that to him. And he said to me, nowhere in Scripture is ownership ever transferred. And of course, he helped me see that. So as we looked at that and went back, I said, at the very core, you only go around once in the world and grab all the gusto you can. He who dies with the most toys wins. It's all me, mine, mine, mine. And of course, the builder generation is the bumper sticker on their RV, I'm spending my children's inheritance. It's my turn now, right? Well, that means, and Christians are no different. Research shows that Christians don't have this suddenly, oh, everything's fine. We have some of the same cultural impact. So the whole point is, if you're trying to be a biblical steward, and if you're trying to go through some of the things in revolution and generosity we'll talk about, is to be transformed. Part of the transformation process is right there in this Psalm 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it and all who dwell in it. We have to give up ownership in order for us to be good stewards. And as I'm going to share with you on stewardship as a lifestyle, it's holistic. It's not just money. It's our time, our priorities, our health, our temples, our creation. All those things are on loan. The blood that runs through our veins, our children, our spouses, are on loan to us. We don't own them. Second of all, I would encourage all of you to study 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. That is where Paul really gives the New Testament development principle. It starts out with him telling the church at Corinth about the believers at Macedonia, right? Right? Macedonia, yeah. And he says, out of their most severe trial, they pleaded with us for the privilege of giving. They say, and then they surprised us. First, they gave themselves to the Lord, and then to the ministry. So, stewardship draws us closer to the Lord. And then my favorite verse is 2 Corinthians 8:9. Just as you excel in faith, in love, in earnestness for us, and in knowledge, see that you excel in the grace of giving. Paul is saying that of all the pillars of our faith that we hear hundreds of sermons on, excelling, not dabbling at, not if there's enough money left over at the end of the month, but excelling in the grace of giving is just as important. Now, I just challenge anybody in the room to talk to your pastor and count up through all the sermons and messages and teaching, compare all those on love, compare all those on pillars of our faith, and then compare them to how many great teaching on excelling in the grace of giving. One of the things in being in my doctoral program, there's 17 of us, and 2 of us were non-pastors. And so for most of my career, I've been asking pastors, and I was on the board of a graduate school, and we had a doctoral level course on stewardship. And I just ask pastors all the time, have you had any training on stewardship? Zero. And so as we look at the generations, say what our builder generation pastors are retiring, and I'm going to share some of the trends now of boomer generation pastors that are senior pastors. What message? And they say, I hate it. One of the books, some of these young pastors said to me, John, when you figure it out, let me know. That kind of thing. So 2 Corinthians 8:9 also goes on to say that giving is a form of worship. Men will praise God on account of how you give. Now, I want to tell you I don't teach on the tithe. After looking at equal number of books on tithing and not tithing, New Testament, I've come to the conclusion that the tithe is a fine measurement. But tithing is Old Testament and part of the Old Testament, that what Paul and Jesus really were teaching to live a lifestyle of generosity and to go way beyond the tithe. And so if you want to go to generousgiving.org, they back that up with their scriptural things. But again, I'm just sharing that with you not to create a controversy, but to say one of the things of this buster generation and new generation emerging church is they will not even teach on stewardship because it's totally fundraising to them. So to me, tithing is a builder generation word. Just like missions is. I'm working with a missions organization now, and the positioning of these words that were just commonplace to the builder generation, this next generation is not picking up those words. So to me, living a generous lifestyle has more to do with being a disciple of Christ than it is to follow the law of the tithe. That's my view. So, yes, sir.
But do you have a sense in your mind of how long it takes a believer to become generous?
Oh,
Is that an irrelevant question? Is there, because here's the possible layout. It could be that only the older churches that are not growing have a higher percentage of giving because they've got these older, mature people there, and the newer, younger churches that are growing, that's where reaching people, their percentage is low.
I will try to address that in a couple things, and my mind is going in about an hour and a half's worth, so I'm going to have to not give you all, because there's a number of issues on that. One is the dumbing down of the Bible in our churches. When you dumb down what Scripture has in value, and research shows that 75% of churches in America are dead or dying. Now, however that's measured, or whatever, we know that there are just tons of churches that are just, but you look at the builder generation, why were they stewards? And why were our parachurches started mostly by generous donors of that generation? They were taught in church all the way through Sunday school about giving and generosity. Okay. So remember, they had a heritage of that. They also had a relationship to the Depression and all the cultural things. Then you come down to boomers. We've analyzed everything, but there's less teaching of the Bible. My belief and thesis is, the emerging church, and I'm going to use that term not to be confused with emergent and some of the theological question thing. I'm saying just the next generation of God's church. Okay, that's what I mean by that. They are so skeptical, and I'll show you research on that, that the idea of doing a fundraiser, they don't even take offerings, some of them. So to me, if they were shown the true, but they are hungry for the Bible. So the answer is to teach the biblical truth and not be ashamed of it, and to see, because I believe the young people will embrace that. Now, back to your, how long do they? I don't know. My old pastor used to say, the first fruits, the principle of first fruits, give to God first. Now that may sound legalistic to some, but actually it's a spiritual discipline concept as opposed to the legalism. He would say, give first to God's work. And again, in that day, it was to the local church, the first 10%, and I'll go through some of those changes too in a minute, for 6 months. And if God hasn't supplied all of your needs, come back and we will give you a full refund. 100% guarantee on God following through in His promises if you follow through. So you say, well, how does someone learn that? They learn it experientially. Giving and living the life of a steward is very experiential, which is going to tie into the buster generation. And so I'm going to come back to that now. I mean later, not now. So I don't know if I answered portions of your question.
Can I ask it another way?
Okay.
Real quickly?
All right.
Is it an environment that you would suggest to a church, to a group of Where just giving testimonies and or is it an actual teaching, part of the discipleship process that should come earlier rather than later?
I believe totally it's part of discipleship. And that's what that gentleman, is it Mark? Mentioned, and what I'm learning more and more. Stewardship is about how we live our lives. What we've taught is it's a fundraising strategy to fund budgets and organizations. You get into, how many of you read The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn? Well, in there, one of his 6 points is the only way to defeat the disease we have called, the word before that, affluenza. We all have affluenza, that we think we have a right to be affluent. The only way to defeat materialism is to give it away. Now, why is that? And that goes back to your point, is because money grabs us. Spiritually, money moves from being a tool to being an idol. In the spiritual sense, money moves from being a tool that we use in our lives to being an idol, which Satan uses to destroy marriages, destroy countries, destroy everything, right? So if you look upon it as a spiritual issue, then this all makes sense. So we've been dumbing down the Bible teaching. All right, so I don't know if that, but I'm going to move on. But the discipleship part, walking with Christ, being transformed to say, when you give money away, it no longer has a stranglehold on you. That is Randy Alcorn's point. The only way to defeat materialism is to become more generous. Okay? All right. So then let's talk just for a couple minutes, and it's in the book there, but strategies that minister to your partners, that are a ministry to them. And the first one I put is prayer. How many of you ask for prayer from your partners? How many of you ask for prayer requests from your partners so you can pray for them? It was interesting how I learned this. I created my first monthly partner program, and we started getting the monthly gifts in, and with that we put your prayer requests on back. And they started coming in, and then the staff, of course, we're mainly a direct mail agency, grassroots as we would call it, so you get thousands of responses back, and the staff saw them as a resource, right? You process, it's a revenue stream. Well, then we get these prayer requests, and we created postcards from the Union Gospel Mission and said to the staff, how many do you want? You want 3 today, you want 2, you want 1, or whatever. And then they prayed, and they wrote a postcard back, I'm praying for your father's cancer surgery. Well, it did 2 things. One is it said to the donors, I am more to this ministry than just a source of money. But you know what it said to the staff? These are real people. These are people that see giving to us as a part of their walk with Jesus Christ. You know, Larry told me about your use of the word partner. And I like that word. My second book was called The Monthly Partner. And I'm going to talk to you about why that core, that group of people, the commitment of a partner. Yes, I know investor. Yes, I know ROI. Yes, donor. All those things. But the thing is that these stewards are saying, I want to share the gospel on campus, but I can't. It just isn't. My church wants to be evangelistic in the prisons, but we can't. So what does it mean to be a Campus Crusade for Christ? What does it mean to be a rescue mission or a crisis pregnancy center? It means that the definition of the church is the church, as opposed to a denomination where it's changed. And we do the work of the gospel in different structures. When Bill Bright had the vision to go and share the gospel with college students, and then you expanded it to all your other ministries. But you must believe that partner, as they give to you and pray for you and you pray for them, truly a part of them says, and I believe Paul teaches this both in 2 Corinthians 8:9 and in the 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, where he said, I can go and plant this church because of what you're doing back there. Now, maybe he doesn't say specifically, but I believe that when we give and you are out there sharing Christ, your partners are with you spiritually. That's what I believe in God's economy. Okay? All right. So that's prayer. Appeals, personal presentations, events. What this morning he called the ask. Why is that ministering to a partner? How is asking for money ministering to a donor? An appeal letter, whatever. Yes, Dan.
It allows them the opportunity to be engaged in the work.
Okay, it gives them an opportunity to be engaged in the work. Okay, what else? Yes, sir. And then there.
Seems that it would require a faith step or trust in the Lord to respond.
Okay, a faith step. We're challenging them to step out in faith once they hear. What are they hearing first? What are they hearing?
Well, what God is doing and an opportunity to be involved with God, and an opportunity for them to trust their resources to that.
Well, I'm going to make a little fun of your tone of voice. Well, it's just an opportunity to be involved with God and God's Word. Involved with God. I mean, this is God. It's kind of like when I work with organizations, I'm trying to help develop the case for support, and they say, well, tell me what's going on in the front lines. Well, you know, there were 2 miracles on Monday, and then Tuesday was a 3 miracle day, but Wednesday's slow, only 1 miracle. Miracles. These are miracles. These is God working, the power of Jesus Christ going out through you, and they want to know about it. So yeah, just working with God, just a minor thing. I mean, our faith believes that in this ministry that when we partner, we're a part of supernatural things. Hello? You know, and we get into this administrative, you know, I love all the charts and organizational development, but the whole thing is if the front lines ministry doesn't get you enthused, you know, okay, did I let you finish? Okay, good, then there was one over here. Yep. So you are giving them an opportunity, as Randy Alcorn says, sending it on ahead. The whole idea is I wrote something called God's Eternal Economic Equation, and I'm not going to share it all with you now, but it's the whole idea. It's a comprehensive from Him being the most generous giving, all the way that I believe one day will be held accountable. And it's helping them with that accountability. Yes. Good. All right. Well, the other things are pretty much, I just want to say newsletter. What's the purpose of a newsletter? Any type of newsletter. Not the appeal, but the newsletter. Vision and value. Okay.
And then value is you're communicating personally then that they count.
Okay. All right, that they count their giving. Good. Anyone else? Yes? Janice, Panis? No, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Tell the stories. Okay, that's what I call stewardship ROI. The newsletter is not about facts and figures, as he called it, anecdotal, but the whole point is you are trying to be a steward. We're going to report back to you, what did God do with your giving? What did God do with your prayers? What did He do with your volunteering? What did He do with your finances? I believe the purpose of a newsletter is not the latest recipe, not the latest coffee room chat at the ministry, who's the latest hire a board member. It's stewardship ROI. Okay? And I want to say one other thing about this that I think is important today. You are giving them the honest to truth needs of the ministry. Today, everybody is skeptical. Not everybody, but many. And the point is, who do you trust? Oh, I know when this ministry, when Campus Crusade, when this ministry writes to me, I know they're telling me the legitimate truth of the ministry. Now, folks, we're in the business that is not thought highly of. We are in the business there's been much abuse. We're in the profession that isn't even recognized as a profession. One of the reasons I did my program, there are 3 secular master's programs in philanthropy or fundraising. There are none in the Christian world, whether it's Catholic or mainline Protestant or evangelical. Because St. Mary's is not it's in philanthropy, not stewardship, as theologically said. So there is 0 training in seminaries right now. So you wonder why we're at the point we're at, okay? I mean, I went to the ATS, Association of Theological Schools Development Conference, as part of my doctoral research, and asked all these VPs of development, and one guy finally said, well, we've got a stewardship course in our catalog. And another guy said, have you ever offered it? No. These are the seminaries that are training pastors that are supposed to teach about this. They're trying to raise funds to keep the seminaries open. Isn't that kind of an ironic cycle thing? That you're not even teaching the pastors so they can go and teach people how to be better stewards, which would make your jobs easier. It just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, so the point is, do not think too lightly of this point that they trust you to tell them the honest truth of the ministry, because a lot of people don't. And it's unfortunate, because the actual truth is there is not that much abuse out there. I mean, I saw one quick thing down, and I'll come back to you. is a few years ago they had research that showed like of the, it's 2003, so it's been a few years now, we're up to 315 or $20 billion is given to nonprofits in 2008. We don't have the 2009 yet till March or April. And so I think it was like $295 billion were given that year, and they figured about $2 billion was through fraudulent fundraising. By that means people that charge 60, 70, 80% fundraising cost, okay? So the CNN was interviewing this couple and said, you gave to a couple of these organizations that were part of that fraudulent. What do you think about that? Well, that's probably not good. Well, does it upset you? Well, you know, it doesn't make you mad. Well, now that you mention it, yeah, they worked them up to this. The truth is that comes out to about 1.3 to 1.4%. So I guess it would have been over 300 billion. But the point is that I've asked business owners, would you be content with a 1.3% shrinkage or bad income, lost income in your business? I said, yeah. I said, what about if you're a tire dealer? All tire dealers in the United States. It's unbelievable. So you see, we are held to a higher standard in the nonprofit arena. Well, that amount of abuse is so small. But since 9/11 and Katrina and stuff, all the media says that you got to watch out for these nonprofit people. The statistics do not back it up. Yes, Don.
Could you go back to the last slide? You kind of jumped over the one bullet point because everybody knew what that was.
Oh, donor partner steward rights and standards. Okay, thank you. This one is Association Fundraising Professional, AFP, Code of Ethical Principles and Standards, Donor Bill of Rights. The ECFA, Evangelical Council of Financial Accountability, has a set of standards. In my book, in the back, there were some examples of development, what do I call them, guidelines for development. And what those basically say is that you are a donor-centered organization. In other words, it's not whatever we want you must do. It says, no, we have a sacred trust with you. Things like we won't rent your name to someone else. Well, juvenile diabetes, they make money by renting lists. They do. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why you get people of a widow that says, why am I still getting my husband's, direct mails? Because it was in magazines. And they'll keep selling those names, and they go to lists and lists and lists. So it's the whole thing, Don, that we are responsible to tell our donors what standards. For example, consultants. You're not supposed to work with any consultants, and my CFRE says you're not supposed to work with any consultants that are paid by percentage compensation. Do you know why? Conflict of interest. See, the donors, and this is part of your world as well, the donors don't belong to you even though you're in a relationship with them. The donors belong to the mission statement in the ministry. You don't get to take donors with you. You are helping them connect with the ministry. You're the relationship, but you don't own them. So you cannot personally gain from that. Neither can a consultant. And with my CFRE, I can't even work with organizations that would ever pay someone by percentage. What happened a few years ago was it was then called the National Society of Fundraising Executives, were challenged legally to say you can't enforce that. Because some hospital consultants and fundraisers work by percentages. I know of hospitals, and I'm not sure what other ones do it. And so they pulled the Code of Ethics, because I have to sign it every year. I'm a member. And they researched it for 2 years, and they came back, and they put it back in just as it was. And they said, we don't care if we can legally monitor or not. It is our belief that it is a conflict of interest and poor ethics for us to work by percentage compensation, because I've done this for years, and if I can verbally, you heard an expert, a master this morning, and quite honestly, I'll say this respectfully, he gave you some examples that could very be close to manipulation. And if I can do that and a bigger gift comes and I get a percentage of that, I'm using my skill set to manipulate a donor so I personally gain. So that's why no one on percentage. Now maybe that doesn't strike you in your world, but remember, you're in a profession that most people don't understand. I will have people come in on boards from the business world. They want to hire me to do a capital campaign, which I'll clarify some things that I think were a little muddy this morning. Is that they'd say, well, we don't have money right now. We got to raise it to build a building. Will you take percentage of what you're... No. And they don't understand that because the business world is filled with percentage compensation. And not that it's unethical either. It's just not in the nonprofit world.